It says we're live.
Oh, we're
live. 6 minutes late. Is that considered?
But live, and that's the major thing, isn't it?
Yep. It doesn't get mad at us if we wait too long.
I've noticed this is part of the liturgy of the show.
Yeah, yeah, we're bad at going live and figuring out when we're live.
I just don't know how to do an introduction.
Yes, we're bad at it.
In my shop, we just say, "The Lord be with you," and if people respond and also with you, then we know we're live.
Oh, well, okay. So should we do a rating first or intros first?
Whatever you want.
Which way do we usually do it? It's been too long.
We usually do it first.
Let's do the rating. I guess together we have someone here who knows what we do first. Let's start with the rating because we're likely to say something in our introductions. Welcome to Suicide and Stuff. We're rated R for language terror and some disturbing images. There's plenty of language terror and disturbing images to go around right now in general. So we might not be the most disturbing images that you're seeing today.
Definitely not.
So I am Jess, and I love to talk about suicide. Obviously, that's why I'm here. I am a mad queer feminist, witch, and care worker, and I work at Rocky Mountain Crisis Partners, which is in so-called Denver. That's land stolen from the Arapaho, Cheyenne, Ute, and Sioux people. I've spent my career looking at sort of creating pathways to intersectional and justice-based emotional support for marginalized folks. And I really believe in mutual aid and abolition as pathways to solve a lot of the problems that lead to suicide. And I'm really thinking about that a lot right now, given some of the climate that's going on and the things that are happening as we speak. So that's me. Des, do you want to go next? Des has still not.
It's always a surprise to her.
I know. It's a surprise every time.
I hate bios. They always sound self-important. I don't know. I'm Des. I'm sad. I'm mad. I'm bad. I'm sad, mad, bad.
Live through this. Talk about live through this.
And I run a series of portraits and true stories of suicide attempt survivors called Live Through This. I've interviewed 188 people across the country about their experiences with suicide. And you can look at all of that at livethroughthis.org, like the whole album, all the words spelled out. What else? Oh, and I am coming to you from Lenni Lenape land, which, as I learned recently in an assignment that nearly killed me and ended up being 46 pages long, was not technically stolen. Technically.
Was it? So it was ceded land in a treaty?
Yes. Well, William Penn, I believe, bought it was a treaty. So it was called the Shackamaxon Treaty, the Treaty of Shackamaxon. And it was the treaty never ratified and never broken. So, things were fine while William Penn was alive. But then when he died, his sons were like, fuck these engines. And
the history of colonization is generally pretty fucking awful. And like the current colonization stuff is pretty awful.
No.
I heard from some of our audience that you don't have to say you're sad because of our sad tattoos when you're holding your head in your hand. Look at how good I did on my sad tattoo that I gave you. And how bad you did on mine. Okay.
My sad tattoo is great. And then my cultural appropriation tattoo is bad, but I don't leave my house. So I haven't gotten it fixed yet.
Yeah.
But I have an idea.
Willa, do you want to introduce yourself?
Sure. Well, I grew up 50 miles north of where you are, Jess, in Loveland, Colorado.
Okay.
Land of Cheyenne and Arapaho. Now I live in Sisters, Oregon, the ancestral lands of the Federated Tribes of Warm Springs, and also the summer hunting grounds of the Paiute and Wasco tribes. I am wife to Helen for 25 years now. We were married in the church. Mother to Jacob for the last 36 years, priest in the Episcopal Church for 39 years. And let me say, priesthood is not really a job, but it's rather a relationship with the world. Whatever I'm doing to hold up the holy, and death is part of the holy. It is the ultimate liminal space. I actually sort of specialize in funerals. I did have a more traditional career as a priest, where suicide was just one part of pastoral care. But since 2009, my ministry is focused specifically in mental health, first as a blogger and a peer, lived experience, and now as an author with a book, doing speaking gigs. So here I am. And Des, don't ever write a book, because you have to write your bio over and over and over for different audiences.
I don't want it. I mean, I have to do that for talks and I hate it.
Yeah.
I have like a few different ones that I change a little bit, and then I just make them sillier as I go. I like add more silly things to it.
Well, I kind of went off the ranch with yours, but maybe that's a new direction.
So I'm really excited to have you on, because I feel like we're going to talk about some stuff that we don't talk about very often here, and actually don't talk about very often in the suicide prevention world. I think there's like, some ties to faith communities and then work that has to do with faith. But I think it's really primarily sort of focused on like, how can people who like support each other in their faith also do suicide prevention work. And I think that's a little bit different than some of the things that you talk about, at least from my perspective. You're not just sort of doing like primary prevention, screening for suicide kind of work. Like your work is in those darker, more difficult spaces of like working with people who struggle and like connecting with people who struggle, I think. So really excited to talk about some of that with you today.
Yes.
I am so excited to be able to have a conversation about suicide with people that I don't have to reassure.
Yeah.
I mean, you guys aren't, I presume you're not going to be doing a risk assessment on me.
No.
That comes at 9:18 p.m. Eastern time. We've got 5 minutes.
So, this is, that's nothing to, that's just a little aside. How wonderful not to be burdened, to be able to talk about stuff that's real, without having to take care of the other partner in the conversation.
Yeah. That's one of the hardest things about sharing lived experiences, I think, is that like you have to like then also deal with the other person's feelings about your experiences. And that's
exactly.
Yeah, very unfortunate. Well, can you tell us a little bit about how you ended up being interested in suicide or suicidology or suicide prevention, however you like to talk about suicide, I guess?
Sure. I got interested in suicide when I was 13. When it seemed like the only way out of an impossible situation. At some point, I figured it was not going to be workable as a way out.
Yeah.
Came up again hard when I was about 30-something, pregnant, and thinking, damn, if I don't do it now, I'm going to be stuck. I'm going to have this child I have to raise. The opportunity won't arise. But then also I was working with a youth group in a church and counseling a 13-year-old who was suicidal. And then the daughter of a friend died by suicide, and her friends were in my youth group. So I was doing suicide prevention programming with them, and it just also didn't seem like a good time.
Mm-hmm.
Then in my 50s, I was diagnosed with major depression. I'd been diagnosed with that before, but it hit again.
Yeah.
And I was put on one antidepressant after another because because the medical system sucks at doing bipolar screening. And you know what the prescription information sheets all say, tell your doctor if you have these side effects. And so I did: agitation, irritation, didn't matter how many sleeping pills I took. I had insomnia, suicidal thoughts. And of course, the doctor said, well, those are all symptoms of depression. Just keep taking your meds. They are, in fact, classic mixed episodes and really raised my risk for suicide.
Yeah.
Well, I didn't keep taking them. Eventually had an episode that maybe was psychotic. I don't know, because I never clarified that with anybody who could make that call. But I had the date, I had the method, I was saying my goodbyes. And I'm really not quite sure what broke the spell.
Yeah.
But it did break. And I flipped into hypomania for a while. Anyway, this up and down and all around, and eventually was on disability. Well, I had always been a very public person as a priest and had national positions. Yeah. And suddenly my world was confined to the bedroom, to the kitchen, to the television set, back to the bedroom. And with occasional forays out to the doctor. So I started a blog just because I felt so invisible.
Yeah.
And that was Prozac Monologues, still going. Research and reflections about the mind, the brain, society, and mental illness. And Google's metadata call it a mental illness blog with information, provocation, entertainment, and an occasional rant. So language really is my thing, the power of language and the power of naming. For a while, I did this monthly feature called Oh My God, They Said That. And often the entries were about how professionals talk about suicide. So you have always been my peeps, and took 10 years to find you.
Yeah, it took us a long time to find each other. I had to aggressively stalk Des into friendship. She disagrees, but that's how I describe it. But yeah, I think it's really hard to find people who think about suicide differently or are willing to kind of break out of some of those like very strict, like here's how I do a suicide assessment kinds of frameworks for understanding this work. I like the way you talk about your entryway into like the suicide world as a relationship with suicide, because I talk about that a lot. I think about like my relationship with death and suicide a lot, and I think when we get into academic spaces, we distance ourselves from like this very real thing that's connected to the work that we're doing. And so I like that you started there. That's exciting to me. I have a couple of questions that I'm interested in. So I read some stuff in your bio and I was like, wait, you went to Reed College and then now you're an Episcopalian priest. So how? And what? How did that happen? Because like Reed College is pretty well known for being like super, super leftist. There's been some like, the school has made some decisions about populations of drug users there that I think in some ways are really great. In some ways there's challenges involved in the way that they're working with their substance using population on campus. And so not what I would expect from someone who says they're a priest, but lots of things you've said are not what I would expect from someone who's a priest. So tell me about how that journey evolved.
Right. For those who don't know Reed College, it's in Portland, Oregon, and its unofficial motto is communism, atheism, free love.
Yeah.
So I didn't know that when I went there. I went there because I was a smart person and I wanted to go to a place where there were other smart people. And that's what I found. I wasn't really committed to Christianity at that point, though it was actually at Reed College that I became an Episcopalian. And there were that first year, maybe half a dozen of us who self-identified as Christians, and that grew in number over the time that I was there, though it was, well, there's all kinds of Christians, right? And I was of the more traditional sort, but it never was an issue. I don't need to be surrounded by people who agree with me. I mean, as long as I'm not married to them. And it's the political stuff, the religion stuff, we can talk about that stuff. So it was a really good school, and it saved my butt in my second year in divinity school because I had already read all the texts in my classes, and I was smarter than the TAs.
So Reed is where they do the like really big senior thesis projects, and I've seen stuff with like a spoon before that was connected with like heroin use as one of the senior theses that I think went viral at some point. So it's interesting, but also like I think coming into dialogues about faith with people who disagree with you is probably a really good way to explore how faith works in your life, right?
Oh yeah.
So I imagine that was a pretty cool experience. So what got you from like Reed College into what was the pathway from that into being a priest? Did you go to like a school right afterwards? Was there a whole big life happening in between?
Oh gosh, it's like that was a long time ago. Do I remember? Do I remember the answer to this question? I am the granddaughter of a union organizer. My blood type is AFL-CIO, and he was a Methodist. And I always was going to do something to help people.
Yeah.
When I got to Reed, I had this sudden crisis of confidence, and I was going to be a politician. I had explored several different possibilities, but I was thinking of going into politics. And my assigned advisor was so intimidating to me that I never, ever, ever met her. But I got, the windy day, top of the hill, crisis day in which I heard God say to me, you got to stop letting the church stand between me and you. I'd been raised Roman Catholic, and I took that as a sign that it really was okay to let that go and become an Episcopalian. And this was in the early 70s, and the Episcopal Church was really agitating toward ordaining women as priests, but it hadn't happened yet. I didn't really know that, but I decided what's wrong with the world isn't going to be fixed by me running for political office, because it's people's hearts and minds. I mean, sin is the problem here, not laws. So it would make more sense to address it from the pulpit than from the political campaign, which I was bound to lose.
Me too.
And then I am remembering these conversations. Then it was something, because the church hadn't really said yes yet, and I didn't I was involved in that process, but I didn't want to put my own ego and the precious parts of my soul on the chopping block. So I just kind of said, okay, God, I'm putting this away for now. And you let me know when it's time to pull it out again. And that time came, and here I am.
That's great. So one of the things that I liked when I was just looking at your website and looking around at some of your work, is that you talked a lot about, so there's a lot of like bull, I think is the way you said it, because you probably cuss less than us, I imagine. But that you said there's
I always told my kids, save those words for when they're really, really, really necessary, and never am I going to defend you if you use them in front of your teacher. But
you don't do that.
But sprinkled into my interactions with my teenage son about once every 18 months, profanity can be very powerful.
I'm sure. Yes, it is definitely probably more powerful when you don't use it as often as doesn't I choose to.
It's punctuation. Thank you.
It is, yeah. So you talked about there's like a lot of bull related to suicide, or in scientific research, in journalism, in recovery communities, like all of those spaces have some problems when it comes to the way we talk about mental health and suicide. Interested in what you think are the most bullshitty ones of those. Like, what are the most bullshitty takes that we have in journalism and research? Like, what are the big ones that you would want to see changed?
Okay, well, the biggest one is that suicide is a choice. I mean, is that kind of seems foundational.
How do you describe it?
What's that?
So if it's not a choice, how do you describe it?
David Conroy wrote a book, Out of the Nightmare, and it's kind of hard to find his stuff. But suicide is not a choice. It happens when pain exceeds resources for coping with pain.
Yeah.
Simple. It covers all the varieties. It doesn't, and I mean, it's an overarching theory.
Yeah.
So I mean, and one of the weird things about this, the name Edwin Schneidman, founder of Suicide Prevention Crisis Lines.
The father of suicidology.
That's what some people like to call him.
Suicidology.
I don't know if I love that as a description, but yeah.
And he's a committed, voluntarist. Suicide is a choice. It's not a good choice. But it is a decision. Don't make such an important decision when you're not thinking clearly, blah, blah, blah. However, that's not the way suicide prevention crisis lines work. And he goes on to say, don't argue with somebody's decision. Do something to relieve their pain.
Yep.
So the theory and the praxis don't go together.
Yeah.
But if you start with suicide is not a choice, it happens when pain exceeds resources for coping with pain, that's the theory that goes with how suicide prevention actually works.
Yeah. Yeah, I think I would agree with that. I think there's some choices involved, but they're not choices that are made like freely, right? People are driven to certain kinds of choices. And the last person that we had on here talked a lot about sort of that, like, suicide is a result of oppression. It's about like people. It's a result of like unbelonging people, and that we need to belong them again. And I think that lines up with the stuff that you were saying.
On a really simple demonstration of that, after 9/11, there were Roman Catholic family members who were survivors of people who jumped.
Yeah.
And I remember reading about, going to the priest and just not being able to cope with that. My loved one committed suicide. And the Catholic Church doesn't believe that that's a mortal sin anymore, but that hasn't always filtered down to the faithful and gotten into their brains about how to understand suicide. And so the priest just lit a match and walked toward him. So of course they backed away from that. It's not a choice.
Yeah.
Some people that was a very immediate circumstance, but it wasn't a choice for me. It's a miracle I'm here.
Yeah.
Because I've done my research.
Yeah, I think about that. I'm like, I'm just phenomenally bad at killing myself, which is good, I guess. But I don't know why I'm so bad at it.
I'm not willing to put up with what happens to people when they end up in the hospital. Yeah. I'm not going to be treated like that. Yep. So I, just was always very determined that I wasn't going to survive.
Yeah. Yeah. So I'm interested in understanding a little bit about how faith has been involved in sort of your understanding of your experiences with bipolar and with suicide. Anything that you might consider recovery, if that's the language you use to describe it.
Yeah, well, I'm writing a book about that's a whole book's worth of stuff. But as you pointed out, I'm probably going to say something that you're not expecting a priest to say. Let me start right off with clarifying the God thing.
Yeah,
because we don't have a common language about what that word means. In Judaism, they do not speak the name. In Islam, they do not make an image. Because as soon as you do one of those things, when you have spoken or illustrated, whatever it is that you've spoken or illustrated is less than the thing that it's supposed to refer to. Yeah. Whenever God becomes a noun, it's already less than what it really is. Christianity, unfortunately, doesn't impose those kind of limits. And so there are a lot of Christians who think they know way more about God than they possibly could. Within Christianity, there is something called the via negativa, the negative way, it describing something by what it is not. And that's always, for me, been a much more comfortable way to try to think or talk about God. And, when I say God, always imagine the air quotes, because I'm talking about something that I don't have words for. Yeah. So chances are the God that you don't believe in, I don't believe in either. But, back to the via negativa, I never believed that God was a vending machine. Insert faith.
What's happening?
Insert faith, pull out peace, joy, courage, a parking place, healing. Which is not to say that I'm above praying for a parking place. I have done that. But okay, I know what I'm doing and what I'm not doing when I do that. Okay, having said that, God is not a vending machine. When I had a depression that resisted every effort, when I became seriously suicidal, when I became disabled and lost my job and my position in the world, I was like, what the fuck?
Yeah.
I mean, I have given my whole life to this God, Jesus, all that stuff. Why me? This is not fair. And lots of books try to answer that. And really, it's the kind of question that if there's an answer, it's disgusting. Those books that answer that question usually do so by saying something horrible about God. So there is no answer, I think, except the one that we make with our lives. My standard Good Friday sermon, there's Jesus on the cross. What do we do with this? Well, wait for it. Wait for it. And that's, we have to go forward with whatever our life is. So I started this book, not the one that's published. It's kind of hard to imagine that I can find a publisher for a book in which an ordained minister talks about faith and suicide, which includes the possibility that people ought to have the right that people, if people choose not to be, I can't remember your word,
psychiatrically incarcerated. Yeah.
Psychiatrically incarcerated, that forced treatment, that people have the right to choose not to have forced treatment. Now, I invented a thing I called hospice for suicide.
Oh, yeah.
And, just trying to imagine what would it be like. I've decided I'm checking out. But hey, there's this place that says, if that's the decision you've made, we're not going to argue with you, but would you like to come and stay with us for a couple of weeks?
Yeah.
Have a clean bed, some decent food, have the opportunity to talk about this.
Yeah.
Have this real conversation with people who are experiencing the same thing that you are. And you can have that freely because nobody's going to force you to do anything.
Yeah.
My suspicion is that actually is suicide prevention.
Yep, it sure is. I think peer respites do something really close to that for people. One of the things on our especially on our peer support line, but I think on our crisis line too, that we experience here is that people who need to call us a lot, for whom like suicide is a pretty constant companion, I think, will talk to us about wanting us to be on the phone with them when they die and things like that. Things that are outside of the scope of the service that we provide. But I also just feel like there's this space for I think there is this space for that. And it might be suicide prevention. And for some people it might not be, but it would be nice for people to have care and support when they die, no matter what way they die.
Yeah.
That would be a nice thing for us to have in our communities. And I mean, we struggle with that when people are dying from illnesses and all kinds of other things too. It's not like we're good at death here in the United States most of the time.
Yeah, well, I think oncology has kind of gotten its act together about that, and it would be nice if people started treating mental illness like they treat cancer. So, it's a huge issue in my life. When I came through that, It was a really searing experience. And the way I put it now is I just don't know as much about God as I used to.
Mm.
But I am really, really committed to the way of love. And, the way of Jesus. Because that idea points me in the direction that I want to go. That, I think, is a life worth living. And that's a life that gives me a context for understanding my pain and how to deal with the bullshit in the world. Honestly, I'm not perfect at this, but I try to say my prayers in the morning and recommit to following the way of love. Read some scripture, think about what that says. And then in morning prayer, you go from praise to scripture to intercessions. And so I open Twitter for my intercessions. And I find stuff to pray about and people to pray for, and also a way to practice supporting people.
That's pretty great. I like that. I apologize if my dog is disruptive, but he had a lot of feelings, apparently. I think he knows when conversations feel like big ones, he like wants to get up and get involved in them. So every once in a while he's like, oh, I'm gonna be there.
I would like to be there for that, and also lick your gums, please. Thank you.
Yeah, he wants to really lick people a lot. Just I'm bad at segues, but I would like to move on to our beef corner. Because I think we all have some beefs, and I especially have some beefs today. I mean, there's lots of things to take beef, to have beef with, both in the suicide world and then also, the world, which are really the same place. But Des, do you want to put up your beef corner image?
Which one?
I don't know. Whichever one you want. You've had 44 minutes. Oh, God damn it. It's so gross. It's so gross. Des, how much of it? It's so long.
It's always the same amount of long.
It's just so long. I'm so freaked out by all the gross beef. And
the JFK looking head.
So beef corner is when we just talk about our beefs with anything we feel like we have beefs about. I feel like I just am experiencing a lot of like spiritual pain, I think is the way I would want to describe it, about like our policing system, our carceral system, and the like really bad solutions that we have to violence. Like I just, I want to be able to feel something. I don't know. I want to be able to feel something different about this trial with the person who murdered George Floyd. But then it just reinforces, putting someone on trial and putting them into this system just reinforces that whole system too. And it's just there's no justice in any of this. Like there's no justice in any of it. And so I just feel bad. I don't know what the right word is. It just feels hard and disappointing, and like painful, just really, really painful watching all of the things happen. And I just worry that some of like this decision, this kind of court decision, will be used to try and stop the momentum that has been happening around abolition work, which has like really taken this stage in a way that it hasn't been able to before. So that's my beef, is that stuff sucks, among other things, but that's my big one. Willa, do you have a beef for today?
Oh gosh, I get a beef, huh?
You can have
as many beefs as you'd like.
Yeah.
Well, I decided I would nest one inside the other.
That's perfect. Yeah.
So it's like this Russian nesting doll. And my beef is anti-stigma campaigns.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
I donate to a national organization that does a lot of good. It's done me a lot of good. It's probably helped millions of people.
Yep.
Unfortunately, part of those donations go to these anti-stigma campaigns. And the problem with those is it always comes back to the person who's being stigmatized. It's always about their character.
Yep.
And that's not where the problem is. The problem is prejudice. When mental illness got put on my medical record, it meant that I was going to receive less than standard quality of medical care.
Yep.
Because for the rest of my life, I cannot get my chronic fatigue addressed because that's depression, or that's side effects.
Yep.
I am suspected of being drug seeking. I'm automatically suspected of being drug seeking.
Yep.
The gray-haired old white lady who owns her own house. And that's why we die of heart disease and cancer 10 years before anybody else. There are serious consequences to seeking treatment. And those glitzy campaigns that try to get people to go get diagnosed ignore those consequences.
Yeah.
They're easy ways for making organizations feel like they're doing something, but what they need to do is storm the halls of medical schools and start knocking some professors' heads together.
Yeah, I like that.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
But that's going to make those organizations look loony like us. And God forbid that those people who are running anti-stigma campaigns should look loony like us.
Yep.
That's my beef.
Right. And then any resistance to that stuff is like a signifier of madness too, right? It's evidence that you
right?
Yeah, it's just a nasty little circle that they've created. I also hate anti-stigma campaigns, and we're coming up on all the big stuff in May. Get ready, buckle your seatbelts, because it's mental health.
This is like the medium stuff. September's really when we fucking go hard.
Oh, well, for suicide, yeah. So, but mental health month is, it depends on which one.
Yeah.
Right?
Suicide still gets tucked in there a little.
Yeah. We'll talk about suicide a little bit when we talk about mental health. I think Isabella's talking about how we could talk about like saneism and discrimination and things like that. Instead, I think that those things would be a much better way of approaching those issues.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
All dogs are therapy dogs. Some are just freelancing.
I do think there's this piece about, stigma has a really specific place. It has to do with some of this internalization of shame and stuff. So I think there's an appropriate use of the word stigma, but I think oftentimes those campaigns are ignoring that larger discrimination piece.
Stigma is an internal experience, right? But let's deal with that in therapy.
Exactly. Yeah.
Publicly, we need to deal with prejudice and discrimination.
Yep.
Well, I think stigma happens in the mental health field among the professionals.
Right. Yeah.
Internalized, and it trickles down and fucks all the rest of us up.
Yeah.
Fucks them up. Just does a lot of damage. And yet we continue to train people in these ways and perpetuate this bullshit. Makes me big mad. Big mad.
Does you got a beef?
I mean, I have 93 different beefs. Can we talk about this one first?
Which one?
It's this one.
Yeah. Go for
I
it.
added, the commentary. Just, huh? What?
Yeah.
I mean, do I need to say anything about that? I don't know. I don't know that I do. But like we were talking about earlier, you know, it's just one guy. It's just one fucking guy.
Yeah, it doesn't hold any of the systems that made this possible accountable. And while that ruling is coming out, there's someone else getting killed. Chuck, stop with the licking.
The number of shootings that have happened this week, like I can't keep track anymore.
Yeah.
It's literally every day now.
Yep.
I mean, it was close to every day before, but now I don't know. I think this is the beginning of what I've been worried about. You know, when we all got let out of our houses, there's just going to be this like tsunami of grief. And I think this is some of that, or some, you know, some manifestation of whatever has been happening inside people's houses. It's been building up. I think it's gonna get real scary. Scarier. It's already really fucking scary.
Right. My hope would be that people could find some solidarity in their pain instead of unleashing it on each other. But I don't know that that's where we're headed.
There are not enough effective therapists in the world to make all that happen.
I know.
Let me tell you about it. Hey, here's my beef. My MSW program, speaking of not enough effective therapists, what the fuck is going on?
In your MSW program?
I could have just set $30,000 on fire, or maybe I'm taking, I don't even know how much my education is going to cost. I know I got 50% tuition remission, but you know, I take out more than that in loans because I don't get to work as much. But like, what the, this education is so infuriating.
Yeah.
Oh my God.
It's unfortunate because like school is part of the whole system that's fucking everything up, you know? So it turns out that oftentimes education turns out to not be what we want or need it to be a lot.
Of course. But you know, if you spend however many years doing independent scholarship, that doesn't matter either.
Sure. Right.
My program director, I was on a path to graduate a semester early, and my program director said something about lived experience can't stand in the place of an education. And I was like, I'm not sure. Should I show you my CV? What are you saying?
Yeah.
My lived experience is the center of my work, but I have studied this stuff and been a part of this community for a very long time. That was so fucking insulting.
Gross.
I haven't even processed. Like, I don't know. The education system, the fact that when all of this is over, if it's ever over, like the loans are going to come back and my life is finally financially kind of livable without having to pay those loan payments every month.
Yeah.
That is the only thing that changed, and I can breathe a little.
So
don't do them.
Burn it down.
I mean, I want to.
Student loan debt would be good.
Sally Mae, I would like to burn your building down.
Yeah, not today. That's what you say when she calls. Not today, Sally Mae. Send to voicemail. No, I think there's a lot of fuckery in the world.
So much fuckery.
Which leads me to my next point. Not really. It's a bad transition again, because that's what I do. The last kind of thing I wanted to make sure we chatted some about is that I was so excited. This is going to sound a little weird, but I was so excited to see that on some of your, somewhere on your website, I saw that you had thoughts of harming your therapist. And I am someone who hears voices that tell me to hurt people. And I think about hurting people all the time. It's a sort of part of like being who I am. I don't go around hurting people all the time, just for the record. I feel like I need to say this every time I talk about this stuff, which I'm sure you've had the experience of. It's like, you don't need to send any police here. I'm not doing anything. It's cool. I'm just hanging out with this dog. We're all right. But that's something like suicidal thoughts are things that people are pretty scared of. But if you get anywhere into thoughts about like violence, harming other people, homicide, whatever kind of thoughts you want to talk about related to that. People really lose their shit about that. So I was excited to see you talk about it in such a like neutral and not judgmental way about your experience. So I'm interested in what it's been like being open about that for you.
Really icky.
Yeah. Yeah.
Really scary.
Yeah.
Yeah. To clarify, it was, I call it the nail file in the neck thing. And it was this experience. It's actually my primary physician.
Okay.
Walking into her reception area, I had this, I called it a thought. It was an image that I kind of observed from outside my body of me grabbing her from behind and putting the point of my nail file to her neck.
Yeah.
And that actually was not the scariest part for me. The scariest part for me was that out of body thing.
Yeah.
And that, I mean, my first thought was, did anybody else see me do that? And I was absolutely convinced that the receptionist was, there she was typing on her computer. She must be sending a message up to the psych ward. And, when the nurse called my name, I expected on the other side of the door were going to be the guys in the white coats.
Yeah.
So all of that I just buried for literally 12 years.
Yeah.
But I remembered the piece that I could handle, which was the nail file in the neck thing. A bizarre thought. And that's how the book happened, actually. This little dance that I did, I coped with it by turning it into a comedic monologue, doing a riff on, this is 21st century America. What exactly is a bizarre thought? And then at the end of that, I managed to tuck in this little reference. Well, over time, and eventually I fleshed that out, and I got to a place where I had to remember the whole thing.
Yeah.
But yeah, it feels sometimes really awful to talk about that.
Yeah.
And I do it because I can.
Yeah.
And because it would have helped me so much if I'd heard other people talking about that.
Yeah.
Because, having the thought and doing the deed are two entirely different things.
Mm-hmm.
And as it turns out, you can have the thought and be appalled by it. And you can also recover from depersonalization, derealization, paranoia, and all of that.
Yeah.
Thought broadcasting and all of those technical terms that I finally got a therapist to name for me.
Yeah.
But I also do it just to bear witness to my truth. It's my testimony. And yes, I am a person who had that thought, and yes, I have dignity.
Yeah.
And by telling that story, I'm claiming that dignity. And if it costs me friends, I have too many anyway. I really can't keep up with them all. And the ones I want to keep are the ones who can absorb that and who, maybe can say, hey, me too.
Yeah.
Because those are the more fun people.
And I think, there's this, if we are talking about these things more, if we can talk about experiences in extreme states where we're leaving our bodies, where we're having images or visions that are scary or not scary, we can also talk about what they mean. And so much of what gets lost in those experiences when they get medicalized is talking about the meaning of them. Mm-hmm. And there's so much power for me in understanding the meaning of that voice that tells me to do really horrible things, because usually it's trying to send a message about something that needs to change, maybe something that needs to die in my life or that I need to distance myself from. I think about it like the death card in the tarot deck is that like this is a sign that something has to change. And sometimes it gives me a clear picture of what that thing is too.
Exactly. When what my therapist for months was trying to get me to figure out why I was mad at my doctor, which I wasn't.
Yeah.
And it finally occurred to me to do dream work with it.
Yeah.
And when I did, I learned a lot. It was a partial understanding. I learned more later, but yeah, that experience was telling me that I needed more help than I was getting.
Yeah.
And better help than I was getting.
Yeah.
That's what the nail file told me when I had a conversation with it in dream work.
Yeah, that dream work can
that
be
was
really
the
powerful.
point.
Yep. Okay, so I feel like we covered both a lot of ground and not enough ground at all in this, as I always do in these conversations.
Always.
We're coming up on our hour here. I wanted to see if there's any last things you want to talk about, if you want to talk about upcoming projects, promote your stuff, whatever feels like a good wrap up for you.
Sure. Go to willagoodfellow.com. You can sign up for my newsletter and you will get for free the first chapter that tells you the story of the nail file in the neck.
Oh, there you go.
Yeah.
That's perfect. You all can't see the other side of this, but my dog is just very creepy staring at me so hard right now. You can kind of tell, but it's a lot. So.
I don't know how you can handle holding a chihuahua that close to your neck.
Oh, damn.
I love a old disabled chihuahua. That's my jam. So I always will hold one close to my neck. Thank you so much. This was really great. It got into really different territory than we normally talk about. I appreciate all of the things that you brought to the conversation and your honesty about some stuff that's really hard. Really excited about the way you talked about God and suicide and all kinds of things. So thank you. And I think that's all, unless you have anything you wanted to say, Des.
Oh, I forgot to complain about Nancy Pelosi.
Do you want to do that now?
You're going to get me started again.
Well, we did start 6 minutes late, so technically we have
really
2 minutes left.
Terrible theory of the atonement. Yeah. It's her problems with Jesus. It's her, not just her, but it's the way that people talk about Jesus.
Yeah. There's a lot of weird ways that people talk about Jesus, I think.
And that's one of the weirder ones that again makes God look terrible.
Yeah.
Yeah, that did not work out well for her. I don't can we get a fucking editor on these politicians? Just
get one person who will challenge you. Don't one person who's not just going to say yes to you on your team to look at your stuff and be like, hey, you don't need to say that. That's bad. Just get that one. You just need one.
Is that who I think it is at the bottom of the screen? Are we having a cameo?
What?
Helen Keith who I think it is?
It is.
The wife. God, yes, I listened to that 27-second clip of Nancy Pelosi thanking George Floyd for sacrificing his life.
Just nope.
And then just stop there if that's what you're gonna do, but then to further talk about calling out for being there, to call out for his mother. And to say, I just even thinking about it now, I get the chills because I'm just what These are people.
Yeah.
These are
Yeah.
fucking people. He did not make that choice.
Like, how do we lose sight of humanity like this? Come on. It's not hard to connect with real humans, and have them in mind when we do our work. Well, it shouldn't be so hard.
It turns out it is.
Well, on that lovely note,
it's beautiful.
Really, thank you. This was so wonderful. I appreciate it so much. I had a really good time. Des, thanks for bringing up Nancy at the end.
I'm sorry, I'm low energy. I have nothing nice to say about anything right now except you're pretty and I love you both.
All right.
Love you too. See you on Twitter.
All right. Bye.
I'm hitting the end broadcast button. Bye, people.
All right.